Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ, and I am a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 305, and we're covering Gaudium et Spes 16 to 17. And the topic is man's conscience and moral freedom. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican. Yesterday we mentioned how we're an intimate union of body and soul, and we mentioned how wisdom perfects us. Today we're going to continue with chapter 1, the dignity of the human person. And our theme will be how our conscience discovers natural law written on our heart, paragraph 16, and true freedom directs to goodness, paragraph 17. Each of the two paragraphs today do not have any subparagraphs, so I'm just going to read them in two chunks. It's a little longer than normal for the reading as opposed to like parts, so there's only going to be two parts, but they're going to be longer. Should be about a normal time for the podcast. So paragraph 16, it talks about how we can find natural law in our conscience and the value of the conscience. Let's read it. 16. In the depths of his conscience, man detects a law which does not impose upon himself, but which holds him to obedience, always summoning him to love good and avoid evil. The voice of conscience, when necessary, speaks to his heart. Do this, shun that. For man has in his heart a law written by God. To obey it is the very dignity of man. According to it, he will be judged. Conscience is the most secret core and sanctuary of a man. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in the depths. In a wonderful manner, conscience reveals that law which is fulfilled by love of God and neighbor. In fidelity to conscience, Christians are joined with the rest of men in the search for truth, and for the genuine solution to the numerous problems which arise in the life of individuals from social relationships. Hence, the more conscience holds sway, the more persons or groups turn aside from blind choice and strive to be guided by objective norms of morality. Conscience frequently errs from invincible ignorance without losing its dignity. The same cannot be said for a man who cares little for truth and goodness, or for a conscience by degrees grows practically sightless as a result of habitual sin. As I warned you, that paragraph was a little longer than normal, and that first sentence is so powerful. When I teach fundamental moral theology, your first class of moral theology, we repeat that line several times throughout the class, to the point that I could basically say it from memory. And the point here is that we find some law in our heart. We find a law in the depths of our conscience, in the interiority, that is something beyond us, something outside of us, something objective, not just subjective. Objective and subjective are not good or bad things, good or bad in themselves, but objective means externally, absolutely, whereas subjective means according to me, according to the subject, right? And so here, written in there, we have to follow that law with dignity. And what is this law? This law is natural law. And what is natural law? Natural law is participation in the divine law by the rational creature, according to Thomas Aquinas. We are the rational creatures in this sense. And we discover in this law a rule that God has put into the universe. God has put into the universe a law. For example, he has put into the universe that human beings need a certain amount of calories. So we can determine that it would be immoral to starve yourself or immoral to eat 5,000 calories a day, right? Gluttony. And so we have those kinds of things. And this law, that's a natural law that's outside of ourselves that we participate in, is something we realize we must follow. We realize it's something objective beyond ourselves. And this law summons us to specific moral acts. Do good, shun evil. Sometimes we also talk about in the same fundamental moral theology, the first principle of practical reason: do good and avoid evil. There's various versions of it. Here, shun evil is a variation on it, obviously. And the conscience is our secret, private core. It's our deep interiority. This is why we have the seal of the confession. Because what you are revealing there is the depths of your conscience to the confessor. And the confessor can't share that, can't use that. And we can't force people to reveal their conscience. We can't force people to go against their conscience. Now, people who are trying to follow their conscience are people you need to work with. People need to help seek the truth. And we help them in conscience formation, helping align their conscience with objective truth. Because our conscience will be our subjective judgment in a way, even though it's God's voice. But we have an obligation to form that conscience so that as much as possible it matches objective truth. However, on the other hand, the conscience can be invincibly ignorant. And here, invincibly ignorant means ignorant by no fault of the person themselves. For example, there are uncontacted tribes who have no idea of Christianity. And so if they're worshiping a tree or some sky deity without knowing about Christianity, they're invincibly ignorant of Christianity. They're ignorant of the truth. And when your conscience is invincibly ignorant, you need to follow it. This is one of the hardest things in the fundamental moral theology class for a lot of Catholics to accept, because you think, oh, you need to do the right thing. Well, yes, but as far as they can tell, this is the right thing. It's the best they know. They've tried their best, and they have a sure conscience that this is what they should do. And so there is no sin in following it, and following out an erroneous but subjectively but sure and sure conscience, because they've tried the best. They've done everything they can. But the last sentence here notes that there's a difference in intentional ignorance. We can't say, I heard somewhere that maybe Catholics have something against birth control, but I'm not going to look because I might be piqued in my conscience. No, at that point, you're no longer invincibly ignorant. You are responsible. You are choosing to remain ignorant. And it is relatively difficult to judge exteriorly how much someone is, how invincibly ignorant someone is, because even if someone has heard something, have they been able to understand it? Right? I heard things when I was a little kid that I didn't understand. And then when I was an adult, I'm like, oh, that makes sense now. I'm sure all of you have things like that as well. So moving on to paragraph 17, it's about how true freedom directs us towards the good. Let's read it. Only in freedom can man direct himself towards goodness. Our contemporaries make much of this freedom and pursue it eagerly, and rightly to be sure. Often, however, they foster it perversely as a license for doing whatever pleases them, even if it is evil. For its part, authentic freedom is an exceptional sign of the divine image within man. For God has willed that man remain under the control of his own decisions, so that he can seek his Creator spontaneously and come freely to utter and blissful perfection through loyalty to him. Hence, man's dignity demands that he act according to a knowing and free choice that is personally motivated and prompted from within, not under blind internal impulse, nor by mere external pressure. Man achieves such dignity when, emancipating himself from all captivity to passion, he pursues his goal in a spontaneous choice of what is good, and procures for himself, through effective and skillful action, apt help to that end. Since man's freedom has been damaged by sin, only by the aid of God's grace can he bring such a relationship with God into full flower. Before the judgment seat of God, each man must render an account of his own life, whether he has done good or evil. Again, this is a long paragraph, and it's really important that we start out and we're talking about how we need freedom to choose goodness, because are we really choosing goodness if our only option is goodness? We're not going to be forced. God gives us that freedom. And that's a good thing, that we have that freedom. We can freely choose to love. Who would say, oh, this person's so loving when they're forced to do it? No. When they choose to do it, it shows much more of their love. Unfortunately, there is a kind of false freedom today that's kind of a license. Do whatever you want. This is the freedom from chains, the freedom from holding back. And that's in itself good. But on its own, without some kind of other freedom to choose good, which is what we're looking at, the license freedom is insufficient. It just says, hey, do whatever you want. Well, maybe I want to eat 3 pounds of ice cream for lunch. That would be gluttony, though. So that's it. And the true freedom shows that we are the image and likeness of God. True dignity is acting in accord with this image and likeness, acting in accord with this goodness, acting in accord with free choice. This is where we have. So our true freedom, true dignity needs to focus fully on God's goodness. At the end, we realize that sin blocks our freedom. By our sins, we are less free. And at the end of time, we'll need to give an account of our freedom. How did we use it? Did we do good or evil? That's going to be the question God asks us at the end of time. This concludes today. Thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time, monthly, or join the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Gaudium et Spes 18 on man as a being towards death. I did not plan this for All Souls Day, but it seemed to work out. Oh, by the way, if you're listening to this on the right day, happy All Saints Day. I meant to say that at the beginning. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, like playlist for digital documents and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook or X.
Amen.